All right, well, we see baseball. We know that they got an offer from the owners last week, and then it was answered on Sunday by the players. Was it an acceptable offer? Enough so that it'll get the players and the owners to an agreement. Scott Lauber covers the Phillies for the Philadelphia Inquirer. He'll join us now to kind of give us some insight and thoughts on what he thinks might happen after the players' proposal, which I thought was a much stronger offer, Scott, than what the owners brought out there. But does it make you feel any better? The owners one, I thought was a catastrophe, that we might not see anything. But I thought the players at least stepped up and put together a proposal that was at least, honorable, if you will, unlike the owners' offer.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some interesting stuff in there. I just don't find within that player's offer over the biggest issue of all, which is player salaries and how much they'll need to be cut beyond what they will already be cut. So I didn't see a whole lot of common ground there. Hopefully it does, at the very least, open the door to some further negotiating this week. It's a really crucially important week for baseball. It seems to me that, after going through the owners' proposal last week and the players' counteroffer last night, that the signs that are on separate tracks, and until those tracks begin to converge, I don't know that they're going to be able to find a compromise.
As you chronicled in the Inquirer, which was the sides still have a long way to go. And most of this is monetary, right? I mean, the players came out and said, or the owners came out and said 82 games. The players countered with 114. I mean, there was a lot of this and that going on in the middle, but ultimately the long way to go is still financial. Is that the top of the food chain still?
It's certainly the part that's getting the most attention. Look, I think one of the things that's happened over the past week or so is that we've gotten away from talking about the second mountain that they have to climb, which is the health and safety mountain. When last we left that topic, MLB had put forth a 67-page manual that detailed protocols for how to play in the midst of COVID-19. And it was a pretty austere set of regulations. We've talked about it here, you and I, on this show. It gets as extreme as, discouraging players from taking showers at the ballpark after games. My understanding is the players have had some questions related to the frequency of testing, related to protocols for what will happen if a player or players test positive, and that they've put those questions to the league. We just haven't heard a whole lot further about that yet because of the second mountain, which is the financial mountain. So yes, that's really, I think, the big piece right now is figuring out how to pay the players. And really the central part of all of this stems from an agreement that the sides came to at the end of March. Everyone keeps talking about that March 26th agreement in which the players agreed to prorated salaries based on the number of games played. If you play 82 games, you receive roughly 50% of your salary. If you play, 70 games, you receive, less than that, and so on and so forth. So right away, players understand that they're going to make less than their full amount of money. Now, what the owners have said is that agreement stipulates that the agreement would need to be redrawn or renegotiated if the conditions of a season change, such as if there were no fans in the stands. It appears that there are going to be no fans in the stands no matter how many games MLB plays this year. So the owners say, look, if we don't have fans in the ballpark, that's 40% of our revenue at least. I've talked to some economists who think it's closer to 50% of their revenue that's gone. And so what they're saying is, look, we can't pay you a prorated portion of your salary based on games played and stop it there. We'll lose too much money. Players aren't buying it. They want to see the owner's books. The sides don't trust one another. There's a CBA to negotiate at the end of next year. And, oh, by the way, because baseball hasn't started yet, the owners have had exactly 0% of their revenue so far. The players 0% of the players haven't played any games yet as well, so they're really starting at zero. And so all of that adds up to this giant mountain of a problem of how much players will make this year, and it doesn't appear either side is really giving a whole lot of ground on that.
Against 114 games because it pays the players out more, even though we're factoring in the broadcast, because it seems they keep sticking around that 82 mark.
Yeah, well, I mean, see, this is another area where, like I say, they seem to be negotiating on separate tracks. Like, I understand why the players want to play more games. More games equals more money based on prorated salaries, based on games played. But the owners say that more games means more lost revenue because of no fans in the stand, that they will lose money with games with fans in the seats. And so proposing a longer season really doesn't get the players any closer to the owners or vice versa. Similarly, there's a concern from a health standpoint that we might have a second wave of the virus in the fall when the weather cools down again and all of that. So the last thing baseball wants to do is drag the playoffs into November, where there might be a greater risk of the virus returning in full force. And if that happens, it wipes out the playoffs. That's where the bulk of their TV revenue, their national TV money comes in. And that would be kind of another sort of nightmare scenario for baseball is you get all the way to the playoffs and then you have to cancel the playoffs because the virus is back. So, I get where the players are coming from with this proposal. More games means more money for them. It also means, according to the owners at least, it also means more money that the owners would lose.
How much value, Scott, do you think the owners find in the players suggesting, hey, we'll mic ourselves up, or we'll do a home run derby, or we'll do some other things that you guys can try to bring in some revenue? I mean, I think the expanded playoffs, I don't know that that's pushing the pile. I think everybody would probably want the owners probably would want that anyway. But what about these other ancillary things?
Oh, well, they're interesting. I mean, and I think that, when they sit down to negotiate the new CBA, all of these things would be on the table. I don't know if they help the owners in the short term a whole lot. It's no surprise that both sides want expanded playoffs. That's more money in both sides' pockets. So, I guess there's common ground there, but it doesn't really solve the problem of 2020. And I think ultimately that's a little bit of the problem here is that, the two sides are focused so much on 2020. 2020 is going to be a lost year for them financially, no matter what happens, no matter how many games they play, when they start, when they stop, how long the playoffs are. Without fans in the seats and without a full season, the owners are going to lose money and the players are going to lose money. It's just a matter of how much. So I think what they have to do is kind of get together and go, look, forget about 2020. 2020 is going to stink no matter what from a financial standpoint. But if we have to wipe this whole thing out, cancel this whole season, the repercussions are going to be felt well beyond 2020. If baseball goes 18 months effectively between the end of the 2019 World Series and the start of the 2021 season, if they start on time, without any meaningful games having been played in 18 months, it's going to be difficult to come back from. Habits form pretty quickly for the viewing public, and if they go 18 months without baseball, they're going to get used to life without baseball. So I think they need to take a longer view than just 2020, which is going to be bad no matter how they slice it.
I really think the pressure of the other leagues are definitely going to play a factor in the two parties coming together. But do you think the owners are looking at the deferred money offer with the mindset of, you guys want your full contract paid out in years to come, but we are trying to tell you that we are not going to make up for this lost season. So we can't afford paying you for this season, no matter how long you want to spread it out for.
Well, that's definitely what the owners are saying. And the players are saying, okay, prove it. Open your books. We want to do an audit here. We want to know, and they have a point because, look, everybody knows what Bryce Harper makes. It's out there for the public to see. He makes $27.5 million a year. You can look it up in any one of a million different places on the internet, and you get that number. The contract was 13 years and $330 million. But what's John Middleton worth? Nobody knows the answer to that. What are the Phillies worth as an organization? We have estimates, independent estimates that were done by Forbes and some other places that we think we know, but we don't really know because that's not public information. And so the players are saying, okay, you're telling us you're going to lose this much money. Show it to us, prove it. And I just, until that happens, there's still not going to, there's not going to be enough trust there to say, well, hey, we'll take you at your word that you're going to lose all this money. I have been told by some independent folks that the idea of deferred money doesn't seem to make a ton of sense from the ownership side for exactly what you're saying, Hunter, that, the losses that are going to be felt in 2020 are going to be felt beyond just this calendar year. Like if you think that 2021, baseball's going to exceed their record revenues from last year, which again, they have been estimated at $10.7 billion as an industry in 2019. If you just think that we're going to go back to normal in 2021, you're crazy. Like there are going to be effects of this for the next several years. And so the idea that an owner would want to add to his debt, would want to defer money, which would essentially become debt, is crazy. No business person would want to do that. So while deferring money sounds like a decent idea, especially from the player standpoint, like, hey, we'll defer some money and we'll help you with your cash flow in 2020. I've been told by some economists that does not sound like something that owners would go for.
Now, how much stock do you put into what Hunter said in terms of the pressure from the other leagues right now, essentially having peace and harmony and seemingly everybody wanting to get back on the ice or the hardwood? None? A lot?
No, a little bit. I do think that there's definitely something to that. Like, look, if you kind of close your eyes and you think about it, the soft timeline that baseball has laid out, where we'd have spring training in the middle of June, we would have the season starting around the 4th of July. I mean, imagine a 4th of July weekend with baseball starting its season, perhaps even with an all-star game, and then jumping into its season. It'd be phenomenal from a PR standpoint for the league and for the sport. If they are the one league that doesn't come back, and if the NBA figures out how to put on a postseason, and the NHL does the same thing, and the NFL goes off as scheduled, people are going to look at baseball and say, what is wrong with you? But I do think that, there's more nuance to this than just saying, like, oh, the other guys figured it out. Why can't baseball get its act together? It's a little bit of an apples and oranges thing. As I mentioned earlier, baseball is really starting from zero, because when spring training was shut down, when sports was shut down, I should say, in March, baseball hadn't started its season yet. The NBA and the NHL were 3/4 of the way, maybe a little bit more through their seasons. And so the owners had, 75% of a season's worth of revenue already built up. So they'll take a loss on 2020 if they can't complete the season. But that's a pretty good number that they were able to accumulate up until that point. Baseball never got there. So, the challenges that baseball is facing in trying to figure this all out and trying to get back, I think, are a little bit deeper and a little bit more. There are a lot more ins and outs to all of this than there are for the other sports, which, in theory, could say, "Hey, look, let's come back. When we come back, we'll leap right into the playoffs and we'll do an exciting playoff tournament." You can say, like, look, let's get all the NBA players together, quarantine them in Vegas for 3 weeks. We'll play a playoff tournament, and that'll be that. It sounds a whole lot more manageable and a whole lot more doable than trying to get everybody in one place for 4 months or to try to stage a season which hasn't even started yet. Baseball can't leap right into the playoffs because they haven't had a season to get there.
All right, July 4th, Scott Lauber, will there be a baseball game?
No, I don't think so. I think that they would need a real breakthrough in negotiations this week in order to stick with that timeline. So I don't see it happening this week. Look, 24 or 48 productive hours this week would go a long way toward the July 4th thing. I have a hard time seeing it. I'm not at the point yet where I'm going to tell you there's going to be no season at all. It just might have to start a little later than what they would ideally like.
Wow. All right. Scott Lauber, at Scott Lauber for more. Don't forget, check out his new book, The Big 50, Moments in Men Who Made Phillies Baseball. That's about the closest you're going to get to baseball, it seems like, for at least a month, if not more. And Scott, like all guys, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, Scott.
Sure, guys, anytime.
Yeah, man. Wow, that was pretty sobering right at the end there, Broads. 4th of July baseball? Nope, don't think so.